The ruthless world of corporate America is being traced back to one businessman.
As perhaps the most influential and imitated, not to mention controversial corporate CEO of the last half-century.
Do you know why Jack Welch is the greatest leader since the pharaohs?
I think I'm going to join up too, Mike. This guy. Who's better than him?
The business press treats him like a conquering hero.
I think he did a number of things that changed the way you run business in the world.
My name is Jack Welch.
Depending on who you ask, Jack Welch is either the greatest CEO to ever exist or the man who single-handedly broke capitalism. From 1981 to 2001, Welch led General Electric. He's often thought of as the first celebrity CEO, a businessman who wowed investors and mingled with celebrities. The changes he made turned General Electric from a respected industrial giant into a huge international conglomerate and the most valuable company in the world. But it all came at the expense of workers, consumers, and innovation. Perhaps the name General Electric doesn't mean much to you now, but once upon a time, GE was so big it had the swagger now held by big tech giants like Amazon or Microsoft. It was on the cutting edge of technology, spearheading the electrical revolution, the creation of radio, CAT scans, submarine detection, and many more innovations. Welch was hungry for power and money. His goal was maximizing profits, even if that meant cutting jobs.
You were criticized. You were hammered, in fact, because you got rid of so many people.
Yep.
And you didn't pull back.
No.
You went forward with it.
Harder.
Playing fast and loose with accounting rules.
GE was guilty of defrauding the Pentagon and bribing an Israeli general.
Or acquiring and selling companies for parts.
You had to get out of those businesses. They were yes to these businesses.
His three primary principles were downsizing, dealmaking, and financialization.
GE was really the standard bearer for corporate America. So what he did at GE became common practice everywhere else. So he did it with downsizing, financialization as well. He turned GE from an industrial company to a financial company that was making most of its money from financial products, high interest credit cards, commercial real estate deals. And that mirrored and helped fuel this transformation of the American economy. And during his tenure, we saw Wall Street become a bigger and bigger part of the American economy.
His short-sighted tactics and obsession with downsizing, outsourcing, deal-making, and shareholder primacy single-handedly established the middle class. Yet, he has influenced generations of CEOs with similar short-sighted ambitions who continue to destroy livelihoods and increase inequality to this day. When he took over GE, he fired a lot of people, which threw the American working class into chaos. His policy was known as the vitality curve. Managers rated their employees yearly, and the bottom 10% were let go, a practice that CEOs still use to this day.
In the end, if they don't improve, they can't.
They're out of here.
The best thing you can do to an employee is early on, as early as you know they're the bottom 10, let them know. So they can go on and adjust their life and get in the right game, in the right level of company. That's, in my view, a kinder, gentler company than the company that winks at the truth.
In his first few years of leadership, he fired more than 100,000 people in a series of mass layoffs and factory closures.
Future does not look good. General Electric says there will be an indefinite layoff of workers in February.
In all of your years, has it ever been like this? Have you ever thought that?
No, never. This is the worst.
But Welch's main weapon for making GE the world's most valuable company was deal-making to consolidate industries and gain market share. During this time in office, he bought almost 1,000 companies, spending over $130 billion to do so.
But the General Electric strategy remains will be number one or number two in everything we do.
He used to say, if you're doing things today the way you did them a year ago, someone has either caught up with you or they've passed you. He was a big change agent.
GE was an early leader in organizational design and training for executives. Eventually, these executives went on to run dozens of other big companies like Boeing, 3M, Home Depot, and many others where they spread Welch's views across all of corporate America. This is how Jack Welch eroded America's middle class, chipped away at the tax base, exacerbated inequality, and crushed the soul of corporate America. Despite how big GE was, it all came crashing down, with blows like the 2007-2008 financial crisis exposing deep flaws in what had become an unwieldy giant corporation. There are many examples of businesses that couldn't keep up with the times, and to make sure yours doesn't make the same mistake, you might want to make sure you're up to date with the uprise of AI. And that's where today's sponsor Tidio can help. Tidio is an AI-powered chatbot for online businesses that offers a combination of live chat and chatbots that can be integrated into your website in as little as 10 minutes without writing a line of code. With Tidio, you can see all the active website visitors and clients and reach out to them with hyper-personalized messages using live chat or using their brand new AI-powered chatbot Lyro. My favorite thing about Lyro is that it can answer up to 70% of customers' questions with natural human-like language, saving you countless hours. Tidio is a top-rated CRM tool that's compatible with popular platforms like Shopify, with amazing 24/7 customer support and personal training sessions to help you get the most out of your plan. You can try Tidio today with their entirely free plan, including Lyro AI chatbot at no additional cost, and no credit card required. And if you decide to upgrade to a premium plan, you'll get 20% off by using the link in the description. Or go to tidio.com/get/bad money. Thank you, Tidio, for sponsoring this video.
All these things from the military that we had learned, and layers and bureaucrats and parking spaces, trimmings of office. Oh, horrible. Get rid of it.
Long before Welch, GE had a history of innovative engineering breakthroughs and careful financial stewardship. It was formed in 1892 out of the various electricity-related business interests of Thomas Edison. J.P. Morgan was the banker who put the deal together, and the Vanderbilt family was involved too. The company had introduced or popularized devices and technologies that included the power plant, the incandescent light bulb, the X-ray machine, the electric fan, the refrigerator, the television, the garbage disposal, and medical scanners. It was one of the first U.S. businesses to provide health insurance, retirement plans, and profit sharing to workers. GE wasn't being run just for investors, but for employees, customers, and communities. It worked. The middle class grew along with consumer spending, and new companies were founded, creating even more jobs. It was a virtuous cycle that turned America into the world's greatest economic engine and GE into the most valuable company in the world.
GE was among many companies during this era that, again, proudly identified the fact that they were running their corporation, yes, for investors, and they were proud to deliver a modest return, but really they saw their success as the country's success, their success as the success of the men and women working in their factories.
But that was all due to change. In 1980, when Welch took over at GE, it was very large and influential, and other executives looked to Welch for guidance on how to run their own companies. GE's previous CEO, Reginald Jones, was a modest Englishman who ran a hierarchical, bureaucratic company, but GE did not grow at breakneck speed while he was CEO. Welch was his opposite in every way. He was an impatient, impulsive man who grew up poor. He didn't care what people thought of him so long as he was making money. Welch was born in Peabody, Massachusetts in 1935. He was the only son of an Irish Catholic family. His mother was a housewife, while his father worked as a conductor for the Boston and Maine Railroad. He was very short-tempered and had a stutter. In 1968, when he became GE's youngest general manager at age 32, he quickly gained a reputation for his Darwinian attitude and for pushing GE to its limits. As the head of GE's plastics business, he increased sales in the division by developing improved technologies for CT scanners. In 1977, he was competing to become the CEO of the company. To distinguish himself from the other contenders, he recommended layoffs at Appliance Park, the headquarters of the company's appliances division, which employed 23,000 people. To Welch, putting people out of work was an easy way to save money and boost profits. In 1980, he was named CEO after impressing the company with his performance over 3 years.
If someone had bought $10,000 worth of GE stock the day you took over as CEO, what would it be worth today?
It would be worth over $800,000.
In the years before he took over as CEO, there had been calls for free, unregulated markets amid beliefs that social safety nets and protections for workers would inevitably lead to mediocrity. In 1970, economist Milton Friedman theorized that companies should focus on profitable production and disregard other obligations. Friedman's idea became very influential and rewrote the social contract. Big money began pouring into politics and think tanks to promote free market economies. In 1973, major companies including GE established the Business Roundtable, a lobbying group that would codify the Friedman Doctrine as the law for big companies. Companies were no longer expected to act in the best interests of all stakeholders, but to focus on profits alone. However, this ideology was yet to reach its full potential in the business world. Even though inflation was on the rise,
the question is, how long will this go on? Inflation running out of control. The answer? Probably for years.
Economic development was slowing.
Current slide in the economy could get worse.
And investors were restless. No one until this point had the ambition, influence, and charisma necessary to fully prioritize shareholders over people in the workplace and the environment. No one until Welch. After becoming CEO, Welch immediately began a wave of layoffs and shutting down entire departments that had long been integral to GE's growth. This earned him the nickname Neutron Jack because he was known for firing people but leaving the buildings standing, like a neutron bomb.
Then you developed this name Neutron Jack.
Oh yeah, that was awful.
Why?
I was laying off armies of people. I know how much Dawn meant to you. And if you need to pass some eye water, I'll be happy to go out and get you some weakness tissues.
No, I'm not crying in front of Jack Welch, Neutron Jack.
Did you do the firing?
No, not of the 100,000 people, no, but I had my share. We were ahead of our time. When IBM and other companies laid off armies 10 years later, it was well accepted that companies had to get leaner. We were the first one.
The damage to individual livelihoods didn't seem to bother him. His management style relied on yelling. He often verbally attacked his staff members, criticizing, humiliating, and demeaning them.
And you developed a reputation. People feared you.
It was ugly, yeah. A little fear never hurt, but I mean...
Is that right?
A little bit never hurt, but that wasn't the intent.
But he could only get so far with mass layoffs alone, so he turned to outsourcing. Welch reduced the workforce by laying off janitors, security guards, and others, claiming that these positions would simply move elsewhere. But workers rarely fared well under their new employers. Usually, they received lower compensation, fewer benefits, and less job stability. When outsourcing didn't accomplish all his goals, Welch turned to offshoring. He famously remarked that, ideally, you'd have every plant you own on a barge to move with currencies and changes in the economy. A company would float its facilities around the world seeking beneficial tax breaks, currency rates, and cheap labor. In keeping with this idea, Welch moved massive industrial operations to Mexico and Brazil.
One of the things Welch did was not just go about downsizing with layoffs, but he embraced offshoring and outsourcing to the extreme. He was really one of the first CEOs to famously say, if he could, he would have every factory on a barge. That speaks to his real lack of interest in the communities in which GE operated its factories.
In 1997, GE and other companies won a change in tax law that allowed them to avoid paying billions of dollars to the IRS. The new twist in the law, known as the active financing exception, let GE claim that money the company made from its international financing activity was actually being generated abroad in low-tax countries. Soon, shedding employees became a routine way for companies to improve profitability. As labor unions declined, wage growth for workers stagnated. With GE leading the way, American corporations were racing ahead while leaving workers behind.
We're going to turn the bull loose.
Welch's next strategy to make GE even bigger was known as the Pacman model, where he bought other companies and acquired their growth. In 1983, he shifted GE's focus from manufacturing to finance, understanding that it was easier to make money from investment banking than from manufacturing refrigerators.
General Electric essentially was a hedge fund. General Motors, etc., car companies, they didn't make money selling cars, they made money financing cars.
He began aggressively expanding GE Capital by buying insurance businesses. In 1986, he bought the investment bank Kidder Peabody for $600 million. He also reduced the amount of information GE released from the finance division to blur the inner workings of the company's money-making engine. He then began diverting some of the company's best talent to the investor relations department, which became the chief marketing officer for GE's stock, constantly selling the GE success story. In time, he learned that the best way to sell the story was to keep the stock price going up by buying back stock and manipulating the company's stock prices. In the 1980s, major corporations began spending around 30% of their profits on buying back their own shares. This rose to 50% in the 1990s. Research has shown that buybacks exacerbate inequality by taking money away from productive investments in worker wages, concluding that if corporations had not spent so much money on buybacks over the past few decades, the average full-time American worker would make about $102,000 today. For more than a century, GE was the most influential business in the nation when it came to CEO development and organizational design. It had its own elite training ground where promising white-collar stars could hone their skills, known as Crotonville, and built by GE in the 1950s. Welch wanted to make Crotonville more like a private club. He refurbished the campus, adding posh accommodations, a gym, and a high-tech conference center, which led to its nickname of Jack's Cathedral.
He said, I want a revolution, and I want it to happen at Crotonville. As a matter of fact, he said, I want a revolution, and I want to have it at Crotonville.
He ran a management program at Crotonville that was designed to be deliberately evangelical, with the goal of every graduate being a missionary for his worldviews. The program gave CEOs a crash course in cutting costs and making the most money possible. Welch's acolytes internalized its tactics and used them aggressively to boost the share prices of their companies.
Well, isn't it in a sense brainwashing? You're brainwashing the management with the particular vision of the way the company should go forward.
No, that's an outrageous comment. Brainwashing, you are Jimmy.
That's what they say.
And with that, Jack Welch had successfully cemented his legacy before retiring in 2001 with a farewell gift of $417 million, one of the largest severance payouts in history, plus $900 million in stock. And he wrote his memoir with a $10 million advance. So, what's next for GE?
Gripped markets overnight with Asian stocks
fell off a cliff, the largest single point drop in history.
Share prices continued to tumble in the aftermath of the Lehman collapse.
In April 2008, GE reported first quarter profits far below Wall Street's expectations, and the shares fell 12% as investors offloaded the stock. The company's decades-long tricks were being exposed as the world entered a financial crisis. GE was cornered between stock prices dropping and debts. The solution to the crisis was a massive wave of consolidations, which allowed big banks to get even bigger and the ones responsible for provoking the crisis to go unpunished. GE barely survived the crisis. The company became a shell of its former self as GE Capital was being disassembled, the power business was failing, stalwart businesses like plastics and appliances had been sold off, and $500 billion in shareholder value was lost.
That Jeff Immelt, his successor, had to deal with. But it's important to note that Jeff Immelt himself, several years after taking over, candidly reflected and took a hard look at the company he had inherited. He did not like what he saw at all and understood that the company was not as strong as it appeared from those quarter after quarter results. In fact, it was a lot of short-term focus that was making the stock look really good. But in the long run, as Jeff Immelt found out, the company had real fatal problems that he had to deal with and that a succession of CEOs have tried and failed to fix since. And just last year, it was announced that General Electric, founded in the 1800s, was finally going to be broken up once and for all.
In 2018, the Dow Jones Industrial Average, a leading indicator of the state of the economy, dropped GE from its ranks. And finally, it seemed like Welch's bad trades had left GE with no money for investment, money-losing divisions, and no new products. Jack Welch passed away in 2020, but his legacy lives on. The vitality curve, for example, is still in use at Amazon. Jeff Bezos has ensured that the vast majority of employees have only the thinnest connection with the company, turning Amazon's warehouses into laboratories where workers are subjected to dystopian forms of management. Amazon's profits continue to swell, in part because employees are managed by software instead of other people. Having an algorithm for a boss can be problematic for employees who are tracked constantly by sensors and cameras and can even receive lower performance reviews if they take too long to complete tasks or use the bathroom. Amazon has a high turnover rate. The company chews workers up and spits them out.
You load 16 tons, what do you get? Another day
While life expectancy for many workers in the United States declines because workers are facing despair and poor health, CEOs make in a year what it would take a millennium for their employees to earn. The richest 1% of Americans possess almost 45% of the country's wealth. All thanks to one man. If you got this far in the video, you'll probably like this one we made on the most corrupt man on Wall Street and how he walked away from the biggest insider trading scandal in history.